Welcome to The Reset, a weekly dispatch of experiences and takes on performance and modern care. For the athlete, the practitioner, and the thinker, we break down recovery, health, and performance systems to reshape the conversation around wellness. Hello everybody, and welcome to The Reset. The Nervous System Part 2. Beyond the Basics, Fight, Flight, and Relearning Safety After Injury. The Reset, Episode 32. The Nervous System Part 2. In the last post, we laid the groundwork to understanding the most integrated system the body has. This week, we understand the story it tells. The story beyond the collection of nerves. We have started to begin the process of understanding that it's an information processing system. One that constantly gathers data, compares it to past experience, and decides what to do next. At a high level, we talked about the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which relays information between the body and the brain. That foundation matters. This post moves from structure to function, from what the nervous system is to how it behaves under threat, and why that matters for pain, injury, and recovery. The fight or flight response. The fight or flight response often gets framed as something to suppress, control, or calm down. But at its core, it's one of the most elegant survival systems we have. We need to start looking at the fight and flight response as an unconscious effort to survive. This survival instinct is embedded in all living beings, not just us humans. It's an automatic protective response governed by the autonomic nervous system, whose job is to answer one primary question. Am I safe right now, and how do I function under these circumstances? When the answer is no, or I don't know, the system shifts priorities. Muscle tone increases, breathing becomes faster and shallower, attention narrows, and precision and nuance take a back seat to readiness. These are the responses we saw highlighted in the last installment of the Reset, where the underlying physiological components to the human body can act in a state well beyond what we comprehend, far beyond what we can train or plan for. Problems we face in times of high stress or survival arise not because fight or flight exists and occurs, rather they arise because those systems don't always turn off when the original threat has passed. In modern life, and especially in injury and pain, threat isn't always a predator or an accident. Sometimes it's a sensation, a movement, or a memory, an experience. When protection lingers, pathology doesn't show up right away. One of the most confusing experiences for people dealing with persistent symptoms is this. Nothing shows up on imaging, but something still feels wrong. Not all nervous system-driven issues present themselves immediately, and not all pathology is structural in nature, like a broken bone or a sprained ankle. Common examples include ongoing muscular or fascial tightness without clear tissue damage, pain that shifts location or quality consistently, symptoms that flare up unpredictably, or reduced tolerance to load or movement that should be manageable but is unbearable. These symptoms can often seem imagined or unexplainable, but we are here to understand that nothing happens without reason. And here is where we can always see the picture more clearly. After repeated stress, injury, or even a single significant event, the nervous system can become sensitized, not broken, not damaged, just more vigilant. It means the nervous system may still be operating in protection mode. Clinical example. When imaging doesn't match experience. A person presents with chronic low back pain despite imaging that shows age-appropriate findings. Previous attempts to fix the structural explanations have not resolved symptoms. Education around nervous system sensitivity, combined with progressive movement exposure, reframes pain as a protective output rather than evidence of ongoing damage. Injury changes the meaning of sensation. Injury doesn't just affect tissue. It changes the nervous system and how it interprets sensation and our memory of it, along with all of the emotions that we attach to it. Pain, in this context, becomes less about damage and more about prediction of the next time things might slip from our control. But what does control look like? During injury, certain movements become associated with threat or comfort. Certain sensations get flagged as dangerous or safe. And the nervous system can learn patterns very quickly. This learning is useful early on as it encourages rest and protection, but healing tissue doesn't automatically update the nervous system's expectations, so even after structural recovery, the system may still respond as if the injury is present. This is why people often say, "I was told everything healed, but it still hurts. I don't trust this movement anymore," or "I feel fragile even though I'm strong." This is the state where I see most people in my practice. It's healing purgatory. Somewhere in the gray, people get stuck between structurally healed bodies and a fully optimized and integrated one. There is a massive difference, and this is what we will try to unpack each session I see them, regardless of the stage of rehab they're in. Clinical example: pain that appears after healing timelines. An individual recovers from an ankle sprain and completes a standard rehab program without issue. Weeks later, they begin experiencing discomfort during activities that were previously tolerated. The joint is stable and the range of motion is within normal limits. The delayed onset of symptoms reflects not re-injury, but a nervous system that learned to associate certain loading patterns with threat and now responds protectively when those patterns reappear. Why pain can persist without ongoing damage. This is one of the hardest ideas to accept, but one of the most empowering once understood. Pain is not a direct measure of tissue damage. It's not even a direct measure of dysfunction. Pain is an output, a decision made by the nervous system based on perceived threat and past experience of that threat's capabilities. This is where ignorance may be bliss, but not completely useful. That decision made by the nervous system is influenced by past injury, current stress, fatigue, context, and confidence in movement. When threat perception stays high, pain can persist even in the absence of ongoing damage, which can often be misconstrued as fantasy pain or ghost pain. All this means is that the nervous system is prioritizing protection over performance in that moment, and protection, while well-intentioned, can become limiting. Those who are able to push past this stage with ease are often people who have a higher threshold for learning new sensitivities within their own body. It comes with experience. Either that or they have a blatant disregard for pain altogether and decide to ignore it when told it's non-threatening by their trusted health specialist. These people are typically professional athletes in my experience. Clinical example: persistent tightness without structural damage. A client presents with ongoing neck and shoulder tightness months after a minor motor vehicle accident. Imaging is unremarkable and strength testing is normal, yet they report a constant sense of tension that worsens during periods of stress. Manual therapy provides only short-lived relief. Over time, it becomes clear that the nervous system remains in a state of heightened vigilance, maintaining muscle tone as a protective strategy rather than responding to active tissue injury. This brings us to relearning safety after injury. In my world, rehab and recovery is often framed under the context of rebuilding strength, mobility, or endurance power in a post-injury or post-operative scenario. Those things matter, but they're only part of the picture. True recovery also involves reteaching the nervous system that movement is safe again. A skill-building aspect is what I find missing in most programs or treatment plans. We take for granted the intensity or severity of the injury or operation in the eyes of the patient, or at least in the way their nervous system perceives it. The red tape has to be cut before that newfound strength or mobility can be utilized. And so we broach the topic of relearned safety and its requirements to an optimized human body. Safety is learned through experience. Gradual exposure to movement, consistency over intensity, variability rather than rigidity, breathing that supports and adapts to, not suppresses, movement, and successive experiences that end without threat. Over time, the nervous system updates its predictions. What once felt dangerous becomes neutral, and what once triggered protection becomes tolerable, then confident. This process is rarely linear, but it's adaptable, and the most important part to regaining function fully. So what does this mean for the healing process? If your symptoms don't make sense on paper, that doesn't mean they don't make sense biologically or clinically. We tend to see things as broken or fixed, and that isn't the healthiest form of rebuilding the efficacy to move without damaging tissue. This is a skill in and of itself. We have to understand that in those moments we don't have a clear path to recovery, where we seem to find ourselves in pain once again, we must know that the system is doing what it learned to do in the past. Understanding this changes the recovery conversation from "what's wrong with me?" to "what is this system trying to protect me from?" This is a skill that we must master as we rebuild. Clinical example scenario 1. Movement avoidance despite strength and capacity. A physically strong individual avoids deep squatting after a previous low back injury. Objective testing shows adequate strength, mobility, and control in that pattern, yet the movement consistently triggers discomfort or apprehension. The limitation is not mechanical, but perceptual. The nervous system continues to interpret the position as unsafe, despite evidence of capacity of that athlete. So they avoid it altogether. Clinical example scenario 2. Relearning safety through graded exposure. After a shoulder injury, a client regains full range of motion but experiences pain during overhead tasks. Rather than forcing intensity, exposure begins with slow, low-load movements in a non-threatening position. As confidence increases and repeated experiences end without pain escalation, the nervous system gradually reduces its protective response, allowing for more complex and demanding movements to feel safe again. Consistency isn't always key. We can then discern that if the above situations and foundations are possible, we can believe that the focus of our rehab cannot always be one-sided to the physical, and we should consider the chance that recovery might be more than just rest or targeted movement. The outcomes can be somewhat debilitating, but also possibly not, and that is the difficulty in assessing and identifying them for what they actually are. I have attached a document below for you to access at your leisure. This will highlight some of the potential issues that you might run into when not considering your state day in and day out. Find the link below to access a short PDF of some common pathologies that might arise if the nervous system isn't considered a target for healing and recovery. Why this matters clinically. Rehab, training, and recovery are all forms of learning. Learning requires a nervous system that is regulated enough to adapt, not just endure. Downregulation is not passive. It's not just doing nothing or resting. It's the physiological environment that allows meaningful change to occur. It has to be prepared, has to be trained. When the nervous system exits constant threat mode, it becomes receptive to new information, new movement, load, sensation, without interpreting as a danger. That shift is often the missing link between persistent symptoms and lasting recovery. Because we cannot see most of the symptoms we have identified with these pathologies, we fall into a trap of ignorance. Our active intention and strategic focus on relieving ourselves of this mindset will determine how we proceed in looking at our body and how we manage its many potential setbacks and ailments. Identification is the beginning of the understanding of ourselves. And the knowledge we arm ourselves with in this regard will shape how we combat future problems that arise in our physical lives, and also help us understand the future blogs that we cover here. In health and performance, Alex.